Photo by Dieter Bohn, The Verge. With all the leaks ahead of Apple's big event this week, we thought we knew all about the iPhone X. It's just a $999 combo of iOS, a bezel-less OLED screen, wireless charging, and a polished glass back, right? We're familiar with all of those things, even the eyebrow-raising price, from the world of Android, so the radically redesigned new iPhone flagship shouldn't feel all that radical. But for myself, and, I imagine, most current iPhone users, Apple's presentation threw up more questions than answers, and it positioned the iPhone X as the most enigmatic phone we've seen in years. Here's a rundown of the things I'd want to know more about before passing judgment on this most fundamental of iPhone redesigns. How good is the new swipe-based interface? If you want to talk about a revolution for hundreds of millions of smartphone users, Apple's removal of the iPhone's home button is it. A decade's habit of hitting the home button to safely return to your starting position is being wiped out with this change in the iPhone X. Every non-techie I know, when encountering a new mobile device, has looked for a home button, not a home swipe. We practically yearn for an escape hatch when we dive into new software. Apple is saying, assuming that the mainstream phone user is now savvy enough about gestures to adapt to a new UI built around them. How do the iPhone X gestures actually work in practice? At first blush, I can't say that the idea of swiping up from the bottom to return home is particularly intuitive, and neither is the distinction between a swipe down from the left of the screen's monobrow, for notifications, and a swipe down from the right, which pulls up the iOS control center. Users are likely to adapt, as they have adapted to Apple's other significant changes like the removal of the headphone jack, but that won't mean they'll necessarily like or prefer it. Another major question with respect to interactions on the iPhone X relates to how the bezel-less bottom of the phone will work. Apple has issued design guidelines saying avoid explicitly placing interactive controls at the very bottom of the screen to developers who've had their controls in a strip at the bottom of the screen since forever. It's not obvious where those UI elements are supposed to be now. The upheaval for app makers will also include a new, narrower aspect ratio on the iPhone X, which will generate letterboxing effects for things that haven't been tailored to the new screen. Videos are the most benign example of that, but I expect there'll be an uncomfortable transition period as devs rejigger their software to play nice on this new canvas. As last year showed, Apple isn't afraid of sacrificing a good and useful thing about its phones to make some other, hopefully better, thing possible. In 2016, the victim was the headphone jack, and in 2017, the home button's omission in the iPhone X puts an end to the Touch ID fingerprint authentication that everyone's grown used to. Replacing the established biometric ID method is a new, highly advanced form of facial recognition that gets the self-explanatory title of Face ID. Did Apple make the change because it believes Face ID is better or because it just really wanted that all-screen front? Here's the question, did Apple make this change because it truly believes Face ID is the more secure and convenient method to unlock your phone and authorize payments, or was this switch driven by the desire for an all-screen front? Insider reports of Apple trying to integrate Touch ID under the screen until the last minute, and even pushing back production by a month, would suggest the eventual absence of it was a compromise rather than a deliberate design choice. One of Apple's demos on stage yesterday involved using Face ID to authorize an Apple Pay purchase, which seemed to me a rather awkward experience. Whether using an iPhone or Android device, I now make most of my everyday purchases with the help of Apple Android Pay and a finger placed on the fingerprint reader. This can be turned into muscle memory with most devices, and it can be executed with the speed and grace of a Magic Johnson no-look pass. But now Apple demands that I have to look at my phone to get it to make the payment. Aside from the basic ergonomic differences between them, Face ID brings up potential security issues that Touch ID didn't have, such as someone unlocking your phone by just holding it up to your face. Apple has put preventive measures in place, including the demand for the user's eyes to be open, and it does claim there's a much lower chance of Face ID being spoofed or fooled than Touch ID. But still, even with a 1 in 1 million chance of another person successfully logging into your phone via Face ID, biometrics remain less secure, both practically and legally. method to keep your private data private. Face ID will have to win over skeptics with a high degree of reliability. Occur.